public school did you learn about the Battle of Blair Mountain in West Virginia? Literal class war, not hyperbole. One of hundreds of small battles spanning over centuries, this three-day battle ended on September 4th, 1921. 10,000 coal miners on strike. Demonstrations leading to martial law and government-sanctioned bombings from airplanes. The bloodiest moment in decades of policy where government chose to support capital in their parallel feudal system in the coal fields of West Virginia. The region led the nation in mine fatalities. Coal companies controlled health care, food, and housing of mining families. Miners attempted to unionize for decades, but were always climbing a violent vertical relationship, enforced and backed by a corrupt political system. Within the government, there was no protection from the violent intimidation of organizers and blacklisting from the labor market in the region. The United Mine Workers of America went on national strike in 1919. The southern coal fields of West Virginia at this time were the only major coal-producing region that was non-union. The continued production in the region during the strike seriously undercut the UMWA's position. After the national strike was resolved, the UMWA set their sights on the ununionized. This began 2 years of efforts on the miners' part to unionize. The first efforts were focused on Logan County. The union organizers were met with violent resistance from the county sheriff, Don Chaffin, who was in the employment of coal operators. Chaffin intimidated the workers and organizers through beatings and even murder. In 1920, the campaign shifted to Mingo County, producing the Matawan Massacre on May 19, 1920. During this, the town sheriff, Sid Hatfield, sided with the miners in a gunfight against detectives from the Baldwin Phelps Detective Agency. This resulted in 7 detectives being killed along with the mayor of the town. Hatfield became a hero to the miners, but he himself was gunned down on August 7, 1921, which further inflamed the situation. After Hatfield's murder, the miners began planning a march to Mingo County via Logan County. They started marching on August 24th, armed with high-powered rifles and machine guns. Meanwhile, Don Chaffin had his 3,000-person army dig in along 10 miles of ridgeline around Blair Mountain. The miners reached Blair Mountain on August 29th, and the first fighting started on August 31st. The battle was only halted when 3 regiments of federal troops were sent to the area and both sides laid down their arms peacefully. The insurgent miners said they were willing to surrender to Uncle Sam and let the U.S. Army put an end to the fighting, but they would never surrender to their sworn enemies, the coal operators and the men who hired to do their heavy work. Even though they failed in the strategic objectives, the Union miners believed their armed march had called the nation's attention to the state of terrorism they endured for so many years in West Virginia company towns. It soon became clear that the Union miners could claim no final victory in this quasi-civil war. Their insurgent leaders were put on trial for treason. The hated mine guard system and all the abuses and protection were kept in force, and the Union was driven underground. 12 hard and bitter years passed before the Union resurfaced in West Virginia during the time when a social earthquake rocked the nation. Then in the first years of the Great Depression, the leaders of the Miners' March in 1921 reappeared and began to revive what the writer Edmund Wilson called the unbroken spirit of the West Virginia miners. It's important to remember, history is not only what capital decides, but also the violent externalities of extraction and destabilized labor markets comprised of human souls. I encourage you to read more on the subject of the Battle of Blair Mountain.